So I'm going to talk today about the Bridget project, so on Xylella fastidiosa. And there's information available on the website hosted by the Joana Vicente and also on our Bacterial Plant Diseases website. And this project, like other projects that you're going to hear about, is funded by UKRI, the Scottish Government, and DEFRA. So this was a project based on a consortium of 12 organizations. A large number of people worked in this project. So as an introduction to Xylella, this is a bacterium and it's a plant pathogen of approximately 600 plant taxa. This number keeps increasing as research goes on. And it's transmitted by sap-sucking insects. It's invasive in Europe and it came from America and causes leaf scorch, wilt, dieback, and plant death. And there's no known cure for this disease. So just looking here at the cycle of the disease, we have insects that can live in weeds, in grasses, but this is especially for Italy, in olive trees. When the weeds dry, the insects are forced up, they feed on the xylem of the trees, and when they go to a healthy tree, they carry the disease with them. So this disease was present in the Americas, especially on grapevine and on citrus. And there have been multiple introductions in Europe, not only once, but several times, because we know that there are several subspecies of Xylella. And we have the Xylella in Italy, for example, in the Puglia region, where we have seen devastating effects on olive trees. Also in Corsica, south of France, Balearic Islands, some places in Spain, and now several places in Portugal. So why is this relevant for the UK, where Xylella is not present at the moment? Most of the European territory has climate types where Xylella can occur. So this is based on models and temperatures. And we can see that the southern Europe is mostly at risk. It's these red and orange areas, but also the green areas, you can see they stretch to the UK. This disease has a long asymptomatic period, and it can be over 5 years to develop symptoms. So the disease, for example, in Italy must have been present a long time before 2013 when it was detected. But this causes some limitations for successful detection and control. So that's where the Bridget project comes from, to help prepare the UK to prevent the entrance of this disease or to mitigate in case it arrives. So, and in the Bridget project, there were several citizen science and engagement activities. Leaflets were produced for different hosts. There was a big bug hunt that was covered even by the BBC. Helen Mirren voiced a fantastic animation to raise awareness. There was training and other events. So looking a bit of the conclusions of this project, we now know that there's at least 20 xylem-feeding insect species that could vector Xylella in the UK. The most important are spittle bugs, like Philanius spumarius and Neophilanus. And you can see spittle bugs, for example, in lavender, it's very common, and you see the spittle from April until the end of June. And there's also leaf hoppers. So the work was centered on Philanius spumarius, and it's widespread and common in the UK. We found that it doesn't travel very far. In general, it travels a lot less than in Europe, in Italy, basically because we don't have such a dry period. So they probably find food easily and they don't have to travel. They generated genome sequences and looked at the population genetic structure of the vectors. And this helps assess migration routes. Could be important in case Xylella arrives. So for epidemiology, we looked at plants for planting. That's the major pathway for introduction of the disease. And to trade decisions can affect the risk of Xylella. Industry actors can vary in awareness, and hopefully the Bridget project really raised awareness of this disease. And then purchasing behaviors of consumers, or even people carrying plants from holidays, bringing plants. And there should be some incentives for reporting if people find plants that don't look healthy. They developed a spread model, and we know that surveillance is essential to maximize our chances to detect new incursions of Xylella. And the risks that have been identified were used to inform policy. So which ones are the highest risk plants for the UK? We have olive, oleander, polygala, rosemary, coffee, and almond. These are very different plants. We have coffee like can be in a house. We have herbs. We have tree plants. We have the deciduous tree like almond. So there's restrictions on imports of all these species now in place, and the imports are only allowed under certain conditions, and especially restricted from countries that have Xylella, obviously. But there's other important hosts to consider as well, and important in the UK, like oak, plane and elm, and also plants like blueberry and grapevine that is becoming so important in the south of the country. So looking at plant imports, there's a fashion for olive trees in gardens, and we can see this was last year, olive trees imported from the EU. Hopefully they were all imported from places where it's allowed under the right conditions, but this is just to highlight what's going on. And this is a tweet from this year. I also found these images of quite mature olive trees being planted in the UK. And there's imports from countries like Italy, Spain, Netherlands, Belgium, and France of different plants. Olive, lavender, prunus, and many ornamentals are on the long list of hosts. So during the project, we also looked at sequences of the bacterial isolates, and we can see a huge diversity. Each one of these dots is a bacterial isolate of Xylella. And this scheme that was developed could be useful to trace sources of infection. So if we have a new isolate, we can sequence, plot in this, and hopefully if it's close to one of these groups, we might have an idea where it came from, what the host was. So we did plant inoculations experiments. We used high-risk hosts, and we found that the 3 Xylella species could infect all the species, and they could infect in UK temperatures like from May to October, from 10 to 25 degrees. Obviously, at low temperatures, Xylella moves very slow on the plants. Sometimes symptoms do not correlate well with the infections, and plants can be asymptomatic for long periods of time. Basically, we need good diagnostics and sampling at multiple points and times to maximize our chance of detection. And to finish this talk, we look at what happens if Xylella really arrives. The industries that are at risk are nurseries, garden centers, and woodlands. Could have a huge impact on business because there would be demarcated zones, surveillance activities will have to go up, and then there would be response measures like the destruction of hosts, restriction on movement of plants, so terrible for trade, application of insecticides and herbicides on insects that are not causing any damage. We might then need to control the insects. Eradication measures could take from 1 year to 4 years in the best case scenarios. And DEFRA has a pest-specific plant health response plan in place. And we know that in some countries like Italy, Spain, Portugal, France, in some regions, although they might have eradication methods in place, they have no hope of eradicating it. The only thing that they're achieving is limit the spread, and that is reality. So just to finish this talk, the highlights are that UK has many high-risk hosts and they grow in different environments. So we don't know, there's a lot of uncertainty which hosts could bring the disease. There's potential insect vectors present. We have models for spread. We have diagnostic methods selected and optimized. We can trace source of infection, and DEFRA has a plant health response plan. But prevention is always the best strategy. We want to keep the country clear of Xylella, and fast action is essential in case of an interception. Thank you very much.